outdoor live video stream every morning at 560theanswer.com.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Yeah. All the Joe Walsh hits this morning. I still like Life of Illusion. It just speaks to me for some reason. I don't know why. Dan and Amy, we're coming to you live from St. Mary's Retirement Home, run by Little Sisters of the Poor. We're here in Lincoln Park, and we're being very well received and well fed by the sisters.
Well, it's going to be my new home. I'm moving in.
I'd love to do the show from here every day.
Oh, you think? I wouldn't? Because I'll be living here on the third floor, and then I could just come down to the cafeteria and do the show.
They've got independent living quarters, so then I could just go take a nap afterwards.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We mentioned this yesterday, but I think it deserves a second mention just because it's so remarkable. This former head of psychiatry, Dr. Heal Thyself, at Duke University, Alan Francis, over the weekend, talking not about, ostensibly he was on to talk about Trump's mental state because the CNN is in the business of sort of doing psychoanalysis from afar. But he got a bit far afield himself and offered this diagnosis of the president.
Well, I think that medicalizing politics has three very dire consequences. The first is that it stigmatizes the mentally ill. I've known thousands of patients. Almost all of them have been well-behaved, well-mannered, good people. Trump is none of these. Lumping the mentally ill with Trump is a terrible insult to the mentally ill, and they have enough problems and stigma as it is. The second issue is that calling Trump crazy hides the fact that we're crazy for having elected him, and even crazier for allowing his crazy policies to persist. Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, and Mao were in the last century. He may be responsible for many more million deaths than they were. He needs to be contained, but he needs to be contained by attacking his policies, not his person.
And the anchor said nothing, just let that fly over the home plate there.
Well,
Didn't fight back or push back at all.
All kinds of
Millions
follow-ups.
murdered, really?
All kinds of follow-ups demanded there, including, Doctor, how long have you been experiencing these symptoms?
Are you okay?
Doctor,
have you had a physical checkup lately?
Do you have any allergic reactions to prescription drugs? We're going to need to hold you over for observation, Doctor. But in addition to that, wait a second. I thought Bolshevik Bernie, one of the leading lights of the Democrat Socialist left, I mean, he was in the Soviet Union just 30-odd years ago as a young man in his, I don't know, mid-80s at the time, and regaling us with stories of the wonderful chandeliers and the very affordable puppet shows that he enjoyed while over that totalitarian state. So when he uses Mao, I thought the Little Red Book was an operational manual for the likes of Bernie Sanders and those on the hard left in this country, and which include most of the presidential candidates on the left. So it'd just be remarkable, actually, to plumb the depths of the good doctor's political views since he decided to go outside of his field of expertise and offer them. But that's what CNN puts on from Duke University. We go a different direction. We've got Michael Munger, who's a professor of economics at Duke and a senior fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research, who may have a thing or two to say about what is being proposed policy-wise by those on the left. He's the author of the book, Is Capitalism Sustainable? And he joins us now. Professor Munger, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
Morning. So the question, is capitalism sustainable? Or is that a question based on the political zeitgeist of the day that you're asking and trying to answer? Or is it based on some sort of infirmity you think inherent in capitalism?
Well, I guess I have come to the conclusion that capitalism in a democracy may be problematic, and the problem is not so much capitalism as the direction democracies might take. So the real problem that we have is that if I'm a corporate CEO, at some point I face a choice. I can invest in more engineers or more lawyers. And if the state makes it possible for me to increase my profits by lobbying any rational CEO is going to say, I'm going to get me some of that.
Well, right. So you're highlighting the problem of rent seeking, but corporations who play that game can live and die by the government too, as we've seen in myriad circumstances. I don't. This is probably not a perfect one. I don't know how much rent seeking Johnson and Johnson does, but the hammering they took on the opioid litigation in the state of Oklahoma. So you live by sort of pressuring the government to use the government as a shield to protect yourself, as a sword.
Dan, I didn't say it was a good thing. I just said it's inevitable because the state won't let you not do it. The state comes in, and I've talked to a number of corporate CEOs that have basically seen this happen. Some regulator comes in, they look around, and they say, hey, this is a nice factory you got here.
Yeah,
it'd be a shame something was to happen to it.
Right. Yeah, right.
Well, what do you
so
think?
you end up, you don't have any choice. This is not something where you're saying, all right, this is what's best for my stockholders. You're saying this is the only thing we can do to survive.
At a certain size, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. A certain size and a certain level of maturity. So Apple, Microsoft, for a long time, they didn't have any lobbyists. Now they have an entire building each.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Johnson & Johnson ruling yesterday in Oklahoma, $527 million settlement against J&J. What do you think about that?
There may be some merit to it. I also think that once you start to play this game, and Dan said it, once you start to play that game, you actually become beholden. And once you're a certain size or your market is your product is a certain age, it's very difficult to avoid that. So it's almost like I didn't used to think that Ayn Rand's books had direct policy relevance, but a lot of what we see, like Johnson & Johnson, is like something straight from Atlas Shrugged.
Yes, and there's not enough Hank Reardons in this world.
Yeah.
You make the point in a piece I read at the American Institute for Economic Research, about strong leaders. We want strong leaders. We want strong leaders. And the point is, no, we actually don't want strong leaders in the sense that either parties talk about it. And explain that.
Well, it's very tempting to say that we want a messiah. We want someone who will lead us politically out of these troubles. And the problem is politics doesn't really work that way. What politics does is create a context where you get an honest, fair chance to succeed or fail. And if a strong leader, and I'm making air quotes, which makes for great radio, I realize, but if a strong leader shows up and says, you've been denied something, and I'm going to restore it. I'm going to take money from those bad people and give it to you. It's awfully tempting. And it's very difficult. Throughout history, you see demagogues who exploit that strategy. It's very difficult not to if the leader has enough power to do that. Usually what people say is, yeah, but we need good people. If we had a good person, then it wouldn't be a problem. Well, I suppose that's right. If you believe in unicorns, then you think that we will always have politicians that will not. I'm not trying to make a partisan point.
No, I
left
understand.
or right, if someone has enough power to do that, they're going to tell some story. On the right, it's going to be some maybe race-based story. On the far right, on the left, it's going to be some story about capitalism. But in every case, you've been denied something. I'm going to use the power of the state to restore justice.
We're broadcasting live in front of the Little Sisters of the Poor, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to earn some brownie points and explain why you assign the first book of Samuel to your students when you teach leadership.
Well, I'm Catholic, and so I need the credit. I need all the credit I can get.
Okay, we got the God Squad here for you. Okay.
The first book of Samuel is this wonderful story about the Israelites have a system where they have laws and they have judges to interpret the law. They have a system for adjudicating it, but the people say, you know what we want is a king. We want a strong man. We want someone who will run out before our chariots and someone who will do what we want. And Samuel, the judge, says, that's not actually the way the state works. The king is going to tax you. He's going to take your sons and daughters to work in his castle, to run in front of his chariots, to fight wars. And they said, no, we really want one. And God eventually said, look, let him have it. So to me, it's one of the most libertarian stories in the Bible.